conference, this workshop over the next couple of days. We want this to be a learning experience, a team building experience. I've been at SOAR for a little over 2 years now, and from the beginning, what we talk about in our office and what I'm thinking about continually is transformation. And we believe technology, when I look across different companies and successes in completely transforming an industry or a sector or solving a problem that seems impossible to solve, technology has been a key component in that. So when I look at Eastern Kentucky and I realize that we have 30 to 40,000 people we need to employ to correct the situation that we're facing here, I really believe technology is a key component of that. And not just the infrastructure side of it. Today is about what do we do with it when we get it here. How do we build an economy in a local community around having access to technology? I think you're going to learn a lot today. We've got some great speakers. Really excited to have all the speakers here with us, and somebody else is going to be introducing those. Glad to be in partnership with the Kentucky Association for Economic Development. I'm glad to have Hal here with us, and Hal Good, he's the Executive Director or President of Kentucky Association for Economic Development, that's KAED. Thank the Appalachian Regional Commission helping us put this on and fund it. This is part 2 of a grant application we had in. The first one was for Kentucky Institute for Economic Development. How many people here have attended KIED or graduated from KIED? We got a grant from ARC to provide some scholarships this year. There's several of you here. Anybody going on a scholarship this year? Yeah, we got a good group, right, 10 or so. Well, this year Eastern Kentucky represented half the class, basically 27 out of a little over 50 that were in the class, and that's tremendous. The year I went through it 4 or 5 years ago, I think there was 3 of us from Eastern Kentucky. So we're all about building capacity and helping you give you the tools you need in your community to grow, and I think you're going to get some great things to take back home after these 2 days. So again, thanks to ARC, thanks to Hal Good and KAED, and I'm going to let Hal say a few words. We're going to kind of take turns over the next 2 days emceeing this thing and introducing speakers. But Hal, when he was hired at KAED, I was at the Southeast Kentucky Chamber at the time. We invited him up to the pike and had a little round table in our conference room that is now Roasted Coffee Shop down here in Angler Boulevard. And we started introducing him to Eastern Kentucky, and we told him we want to be a part of the statewide game. We want to be in the discussion. And he's been a great friend since then, and appreciate his partnership on this. How do you?
Thank you. We're delighted. I enjoyed that cup of coffee so much that we brought our Kentucky Association for Economic Development group, Donovan, here in April. We had 180 economic developers that came to find out just, not only what's going on in Eastern Kentucky, but Governor, what's happening here in Pikeville with Pikeville College, and just the synergy that is around that. And that's why I'm glad that we were able to participate in this grant with Jared and his team at SOAR, because I think, if you come into this room this morning and some of the networking that's going on, the synergy is there, and it's here. And the Kentucky Association for Economic Development is glad to be a part of that. Our group celebrates its 50th anniversary next year. And I see several members that are in the room today, and we appreciate everyone that is a member of KAED. We're proud to say we have 570 members from around the state. I'm also proud that we have a Hall of Famer that's in our audience today, and that's Governor Patton. Our Hall of Fame has 13 members that are recognized from around the state of Kentucky for their involvement in economic development. And I think when I mentioned Governor Paul Patton, that everyone would agree that economic development is almost his middle name. And we're glad to have people like that participate, people like that we can recognize. But we also are glad that we can participate and work real close with the Cabinet for Economic Development and all the entities and some of the other entities that are represented here. We work very well with, in our legislative efforts. I see Representative Couch here, and we work very well with their needs and what the legislative session is coming up. And we also work well with judges and with mayors and magistrates and those groups. Judge Blevins here today, a member of KAED, and we want to continue to reach out to our elected officials. And by doing events like this, I think the SOAR event is a great way. I want to go over just a couple logistics. Our team from KAD is located out front, Kathy Rogers and Patty Porter. If you need anything at all, make sure just don't hesitate to ask them. We're here to serve you the next 2 days, and more than glad to answer any questions about not only SOAR, but KAD, or about the conference. We'll make sure to help you on any logistics you may need. If for some reason you'd like to connect onto the Wi-Fi, I'm going to give you that. We have definitely no problem with that. The Wi-Fi code is SOAR16. SOAR16, caps or small letters, whatever. And that way, if you want to get in the Wi-Fi, we encourage you to do that, because that's what we're all about here the next couple of days. The one thing we will ask you to do is please put your cell phone on silent or turn it off. If you do have to take a call, we know that business is going to come up. We've got a great hallway area. We encourage you to go out in the hallway and take care of your business as we go through, because we do have a busy 2 days that are coming up, but we want to make sure that you're mindful of everyone else in here and also take care of your business at that same time. If you are an elected official, a judge, or a magistrate looking for that Department of Local Government training, please see Kathy Rogers or Patty out front. They'll give you the forms that you need, and we'll be able to provide those for you. And if you need any help with those, filling them out and such, and making sure that they get sent in, we'll make sure to take care of that on our part. And also, just real quick, logistic-wise, restrooms, out in the hallway, as you exit, take a right, and the restrooms are here. This is a fantastic facility. We had a great conference here, as I mentioned, in April, and we love coming back. And the team here, they just do a wonderful job. So, Don, make sure to pass that along again. We're excited. When we first did this grant, we anticipated to have 35 to 40 individuals show up. I'm happy last night we were at dinner, we were talking, we had over 80. And when we were walking out of the KAD offices in Frankfurt, the phone was still ringing for people that wanted to come to this. So that's exciting to be a part of an economic development program like this. And a lot of the credit does go to Jared and his team with Kevin Lux. I mean, they've been great to work with, and putting this together, and the marketing piece and reaching out about economic development. Because as we all know, economic development, it's not a race. It's a marathon. And we have to continually, every day, we talked to some folks this morning, every day, working on those attributes of economic development. So whatever we can do to help, make sure to get with me. But we do have a great day planned. It's going to be a busy one. Without any further ado, again, Jared and Kevin Lutz are great to work with on getting just the grant, supporting the Kentucky Institute for Economic Development, but being able to put this together. So I'm going to ask to come up here and introduce our first speaker with SOAR. Here's Kevin Lutz. Kevin, thank you again.
Morning, everyone. I just want to thank you all for taking the time out of your day to come here, be here with us today, learn more about broadband and economic development. First, I'd like to thank our staff in the back row, Sydney Lee and Kirsten Smith. We couldn't have done this without our staff, so take some time if you see them. Thank them for everything they've done to put this together. In your packet, you'll see we've got some resources. This conference is just the first step of the process. So after you leave here today, we really hope you take action on some of the strategies and ideas discussed. And there's some resources in your packet to help you do that. And we're here to support you. So if you've got any questions, don't hesitate to contact me or our office. We are here to support you. But without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker for today, Dr. Roberto Giardo from the Mississippi State Extension Office. If you were at the SOAR Innovation Summit, you've heard a little bit of what he had to say already. But here he is to get in more detail about community economic development. Please welcome Dr. Roberto Giardo.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the invitation. I flew in from Mississippi. It was a great drive from the Tri-City Airport. We don't have a lot of mountains in Mississippi, so it was a good view. As you can tell by my deep southern Mississippi accent, I'm not from here. I came to Mississippi 13 years ago, and I've been working with very small rural communities doing economic development since then. What I'm going to talk to you today, if you have any questions, please stop and ask. I'm going to make it as engaging as possible. But I'm going to go over some community economic development basics. Let me turn this on. Then we're going to go over some frameworks, a 30,000 feet view. I'm not going to steal any thunder of the other presenters later this afternoon and tomorrow. But what I want you to get from this is I want to plant a seed. I'm not expecting you all to leave here as experts this morning, but please plant the seed, and then think forward. Like Kevin said, this is the first step. Okay? So we're going to start with some jargon, academic jargon. I'm not going to make it boring. I'm hoping you all had coffee, so I don't see anybody agreeing with me all the time, as in going like this. Right? So I've got a clear view of the audience, so let's get started. Again, if you have any questions, just let me know. Okay? And also, if you don't understand my accent, please let me know. Okay, so let's start with key concepts. Public Policy 101 says we've got to agree on the definition before we even talk about solutions. If you and I do not agree on the definition, then it's going to be really hard to even talk solutions. Okay, that's Public Policy 101. So I would ask, there's no wrong answers. And I've got these as gifts for whomever answers kind of right. So tell me, how would you define community? When you hear the word community, what comes to mind? Anybody?
It's a group of people with shared values.
Group of people with shared values. Yep, that's exactly right. It is a geographic defined place where people interact, and that interaction takes place because of common values. Now, the digital age, which is just unfolding, changes this part for geographic, because we can also be a community virtually, and I'm going to get into that later on. So it is a geographic defined place where people interact. Now, when I work with economic developers and community developers in Mississippi, I always ask them, what is the difference between growth and development? And I asked you this as well this morning. What is it? The problem with not knowing the difference is that you expect certain things when in actuality you're doing different things. And that will lead to frustration. It will, pointing. Okay, that's important to keep in mind. Is growth leading to development? Is it really where I want to go from a qualitative perspective? Or am I just growing because I want to grow? Okay? What is sustainable development? Go ahead, sir, since you're active.
Sustainable is development that makes itself grow.
Right?
You don't have to have outside sources. You create its own.
True. Somebody else? I think I'm going to be picking on you a lot today. It meets the needs of present generations without compromising the resources of future generations. Can it grow forever? Or can it develop forever? It cannot grow forever because we've got a limit. You have so much space. You have so many people. But can you develop? What you have, can they improve their quality of life? And can they do so continuously? And how do you achieve that is keeping in mind, okay, what we're doing today, what are we going to inherit tomorrow? Now, that may be kind of difficult sometimes because the political time horizon does not necessarily match that. Right? I've got 2 years to go, I've got 3 years to go, I've got 4 years to go. I can't see beyond those 4 years. Thank you so much. And that's okay. But you at the local level, you that are not, can't afford to have a broader horizon, time horizon, think about this. What are you planting today that will be harvested tomorrow? And the key question is, can it be planted again and again and again? Or will you run out of it? And if you do, what impacts will it have on your children, on your grandchildren? So sustainable development is important to keep in mind. So, we now know what community is. We know the difference between growth and development and sustainable development. Right?
Right.
Cool. Okay. I'm not going to quiz you or anything. Okay. So what is a community? Well, a community, aside from what a geographic defined place, it is also an environment that carries out important activities and functions to serve its residents. Okay? Again, I'm starting from square zero. It'll get better, I promise. So what are some of the functions? Well, the economy, number one, production, distribution, consumption. Communities responsible of that function. Okay? And also the social part of it. What values Are we able to move those values to next generations or to people that are coming in? So the community is the key thing that accomplishes that. So not only are you in a geographically defined place, but you are also doing economy and doing some socializing. Okay? Another key element of a community are institutions. Got the definition up there, I'm not going to read it. But institutions are very important. We have multiple institutions in a community. We have family, we have economic institution, we have education. The problem is, what happens if your family institution is dysfunctional? What happens to the community if that institution is not performing or not where it should be? Well, you run into issues, right? What about the educational institution? What if it's not working as it should? Will it impact the family? Will it impact the economy? It will. It will. So here's where we move. The interaction between functions and institutions lead us to linkages. Okay? It is a capacity of communities to carry out major functions, which we now know are economy and society basically, depends on the nature and strength of local institutions. So in other words, if Group A is not talking to Group B, what capacity will that community have? Not much. Right? So that capacity is going to be defined by how those linkages that define that interaction between functions and institutions. There are two of them, horizontal and vertical. The horizontal are within a community. How well does Plan A work with Plan B? Okay? Do they, number one, do they know that there is a problem? Do they agree on the definition of the problem? If they do, you're way ahead of many other communities. Then you can start talking solutions. But if you do not agree on the definition of the problem, how are we going to talk about solutions? Right? So that horizontal linkages are important. Then the vertical ones, it's because in this globalized, changing world, nobody can do it alone. Nobody. So vertical linkages provide resources outside of the community. That's when you rely on regional economic organizations, federal, state, whatever it is. But like anything, it's got a catch. If you have too much or too strong horizontal linkages in a community, you may be isolated. You may be a silo. On the other hand, if you have too strong of vertical linkages, you may not be listening to your own folks. You may not know what assets you have. And that happens all the time when I'm doing economic development. In Mississippi, small communities are always looking for what they don't have. Oh, I wish I could get this, and I wish I could do that. They're looking outward, right? They're failing to look inward. What do you have? You have a community. You have something that's working. You're still here, aren't you? Speaking of sustainability, why not look inward? So this helps you kind of frame the topic. This kind of the slides. I teach a master's in community development class, so these are kind of the slides. But that's pretty much going to be the jargon, academic jargon. Okay? But please remember, functions, institutions, and the key concepts we covered earlier. So here we go. How would you then define community development? This is my little quiz I have for you. Now that we've spoken about what community is, what development is, what sustainable development is, how would you define community development? Any takers?
Change in a geographically defined place where people interact directed toward particular social or economic goals.
Hey! That sounds very familiar. That's good. That's good. Kevin, did you give the slides out? That's exactly right. It is a group of people in a locality initiating a social action process, such as planned intervention, to change their economic, social, cultural, and or environmental situation. Because I like you so much and it's too early in the morning, I put up the keywords you've got to remember. People, locality, plan, change, situation. Yes, sir.
Regarding locality and geography, when you asked what a community was, I intentionally left out geography because I was thinking of the social web-based communities. How do you address that?
Now, you can leverage that capacity. Remember those vertical linkages? You can use those virtual communities, those virtual resources to address local needs. Now I'm going to get to that, but that's a great question. So it is planned change. Planned change. Many communities are reactive. Uh-oh, they're closing down. Everybody's doing this, we've got to do this. They're not proactive. And I'm not asking you to know what the future will bring, but be open and flexible enough as a community to plan. And the power of it, because of digital platforms, is that that plan can be fed in real time with feedback, so you can then fine-tune that plan in real time. And that, folks, will make your community sustainable. So that's the challenge, because I see it time and time again. And I'm kind of extrapolating Mississippi communities to all rural communities. Because I've seen it time, the issues are the same. The issues are the same. So that's the definition of community development. So now, here's where I need you to have a little bit of a bump in mind, okay? How do you see your community? How do you see it? The typical view is that you have economy, environment, and society. That community view is considered unconnected, silos. Why? Because whatever the red one does, you assume may not or may impact the green, and maybe or may not impact the blue. An emerging community view is this one, which is called interconnected or linkages. You realize they are connected. So whatever happens here is going to happen there, whatever. Right? But then, this one is a real cool one. Interdependent, nested. You realize that the economy can only do so well as the society does and as the environment can hold. You cannot grow this one outside of the green one in this view. And that, folks, changes your perspective on many things, on what your community can do. And that's important for sustainability, right there. If you're thinking like this, you're going to have a hard time reaching sustainability. Any questions so far? Either I'm a very good presenter, or I've lost you totally. I want to make it warm. No questions?
Well, what's a concrete example of this independent community? Because this is a big debate that I have all the time with people.
Okay. An example of this is you can obviously think many times you want your community to grow economically, right? Oh, we can and we should. Let's grow. Remember what growth is, right? Not development, but growth. Well, can your society sustain that economy? Can they really, truly sustain that growth? That's, if you're saying yes and you're wrong, then the red one is larger than the blue. And it won't happen. See? And then overall, the society, can the environment as a whole sustain? Land, water, whatever it is. This one I would encourage you to start doing, and you can go here and Kevin will have the slides. To me, economic development happens within community development and not the other way around. But it's very important to keep this in mind. Well, because we like to get stuff together. That's why I call it CED. And I call that for a reason. And I hammer my students about this. They are masters in economic development, and they brought me in to teach them community development. At the beginning of the class, I get a lot of looks like, what is this guy talking about? But it is community economic development. When you do both, you're more than likely to be sustainable. If you focus on one on the expense of the other, what's going to happen? You're going to have some issues. Yay or nay? You're such a quiet crowd. It'll get a little bit more fun, I promise. Yes?
I just say it's so nice to see economics nested inside of community, because the competition between jurisdictions is often over the tax base of new economic development. But who works at that business goes beyond those borders.
Exactly.
And then as you develop that workforce, suddenly the neighboring communities are much more successful in attracting in businesses who need that workforce. So that's how I feel it got to that gentleman's question, that suddenly the community boundaries, the common purpose is more apparent.
That's a good point. Thank you. Yes. So how would you define then community economic development? There's no definition. What I've learned in the trenches and what I've learned resonates in the trenches is this. It allows residents to mobilize and build assets to improve their quality of life in a sustainable way. When you join both. Economic development typically focuses on industry, jobs. And for those to be done, you've got to have education, you've got to have leadership, but many times you take them for granted. And if you focus only on chasing that industry to come to your community, have you even asked if the leadership is up to it? Your educational system, your workforce, and a bunch of other issues come into mind. So that's why this is a process. It is not an outcome. It is not an output. It is a process. And why I call it that, it's because in outcome you assume that once you reach it, you're pretty cool. Well, things change. So that's why it's a process. You've got to be continuously tweaking it. Because the needs and assets in your community are going to be shifted. Okay? So that's where I end all the academic jargon and concepts and elements and stuff, but I really enjoy starting from scratch. Because if I would have jumped to the next slides, you may have a different definition of community than I do, and then I would lose you totally at that point. Okay? Questions, comments about this? The key concepts and elements of a community economic development, sustainability. Clear as water? Okay, off we go. So now we're going to get into a little bit more pragmatic stuff. How do you mobilize and build assets to improve quality of life in a sustainable way? How can you achieve that? As economic developers, you will find some of these familiar. Up first are very basic community development approaches, technical assistance, and self-help. Technical assistance means when a community doesn't have the means or expertise and they call in somebody to do a feasibility study, to do something. It is good, but it's not community development. It is a component. It is an ingredient. Because like I said, nobody knows everything and nobody can address everything, so it's okay to reach out for help. The problem is, and that's the main criticism of this community development approach, it generates dependency. Oh, let's call the consultant. Oh, let's do this. Oh, let's do that. Is it sustainable? No. Nope. And then, like all academics, they go from one spectrum to the other, and so this is like in the 60s, 70s, okay? I wasn't even born, but I like to talk about it. Self-help came along and said, wait, that technical assistant thing, it's cool, but it's really what the U.S. foreign policy aim has been for the past 40 years. That's what they were saying in the 60s, right? We've got to make sure the community can do it on their own. So that's the self-help. How can you empower that community? And then the main theoretical thing that goes along with it is asset mapping, which is self-explanatory, right? As a community, as that community economic developer facilitator, you look within the community, see what assets you have, and then say, okay, how can we work together? Let's do this. Occasionally, you're going to have an issue that you need technical assistance. So if you tap into both, you will have a sustainable approach. And I'm going to go a little bit more detail. We're going to have an exercise later today using that asset mapping framework Please keep it in the back of your minds, because when I switch to the digital age and other approaches, I hope you always fall back to this. That's what I tell my students every time. If I confuse you to death, fall back to that. Go back to the principles, to the basic stuff. Then we have more community economic development, or economic development models that you are familiar with. Who here is familiar with the CARE model? Well, I'm sure you're... The label may not be there, but just so we speak academic jargon, I'm going to go over that one. Who's familiar with cluster-based economic development? Ah, I've got to change that bullet then. Okay, mental note. And then we're going to talk about more holistic approaches. This one is very community development focused. This one is very economic development focused. But these two combine both, which is what we've got to shoot for. So we're going to start with CARE. You're doing it. Every economic development developer does it. They may not call it that way, but that's what the academic jargon folks do call it. CARE model stands for C. That means create. Remember, we're focusing directly into economic development right now. So create. How many of you have entrepreneurship programs in your communities? You're taking care of that C. Of course, it's a little bit more complicated. There's an ecosystem, whatever, that goes on with that. I don't have time to go over that today, but just remember. And the A, what do you think the A stands for?
Attraction.
Which is, I would guess, 90% of the efforts of every rural community. Attract. What about the R?
Retention.
Yes. Why didn't you raise your hand, sir?
Because I've never seen it this way before.
Oh, okay.
And expansion.
You're stealing my thunder. So thank you. Retain, keep existing businesses. How can you keep existing businesses if you're constantly looking to lure outside industry? Do you pay attention to the moms and pops? Do you pay attention to your mainstream? Do you? Remember that self-help asset mapping? Keep falling back to that one. Do you pay attention to them? And that's where digital platforms that I'm going to explain later on come. And that's one of the workshops that you're going to do tomorrow. And expand. Oops, and I forgot an X. Sorry. These two should go hand in hand. And in this highly competitive world for the A, I'm not saying just turn your back on it. But diversify your portfolio, folks. How many of you have investments for retirement? Do you have it all in one single basket? You don't, do you? It's the same with your community. Why are you just focusing here? Because it's what everybody's doing? Because it has a large political splash on the newspaper, 20 jobs. But then 5 years later, and then they go, those 20 jobs. Why? So if you personally have a diverse portfolio, why not doing it with economic development in your community? Thank you for sitting so close to me.
Oh, I'm afraid that was all there was left.
She just broke my heart. That's fine. That happens. So that's your homework. Why, oh why, do you do that? Because remember, you're part of that community, right? And as an individual, you are already having a diversified approach. Why not as a community? And now, every time I ask that in Mississippi communities, I always get back the look of, oh, right, like we can afford it. And that's a valid question. I work with communities that have a part-time mayor. But when the will and motivation exist, believe me, you will find the resources. And that's where digital platforms help a lot too, which I'll cover forward. So that's the CARE model. So if I go back to this, and I say, does anybody know about the CARE model?
Yes.
No. Okay, good. Big deal. Kevin, write down in my evaluation, please. Up next is cluster-based economic development. I did my dissertation on this. And it's what many rural communities are kind of chasing, and it's a little bit more strategic. It is. It's not a shotgun approach. It is very competitive, and it's got some plus to it. The thing is, it's outdated. The father of them all, Krugman, got the Nobel Prize in 2000 for his work for this in the 90s. When he received his prize, he said, well, thank you so much. But this is outdated already. Keep that in mind, but I do realize that many communities can benefit from this. But again, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So what is it? It is comparative versus competitive. And I'm not going to bore you to death, but I just like this topic because it was my dissertation. So, comparative advantage back in the day, it's you've got a gold mine in place and then go out there and attract those industries. Okay? So that's how you measure it. Location quotient and change in employment. Those two dynamics give you those four options. So you're thinking, what in the world is this crazy guy talking about? This is a region in Georgia. I didn't have access to the data to do it for SOAR, but I will, Kevin, so don't put that on my evaluation. But this is a read from Georgia. You can see it's predefined clusters. Each one of these clusters have many, many, many industries within them that are what? Interacting, because they are related industries. So here you can see the x-axis is the location quotient, and the y-axis is change in jobs over 5 years. And the size of the bubble is the wages, how well they pay. So this particular region in Georgia has a very strong, or a star in business and financial cluster. Biomedical, see, their location quotient is about 2 point something. And their jobs are kind of, they didn't grow, but this one grew, energy grew, but this one has a lot of potential. Why? Because it still has room to become more concentrated. It is gaining employment. Does that make sense? So part of my job in my other life was to go around communities and explain to them what that chart means. So that's cluster-based economics. You're a little bit more strategic. And if you can't attract, why not create?
May I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
So at one time, an element of cluster development thinking was that proximity to markets was also a very influential factor because it shortened the time it took to get feedback from customers that helped move forward innovation. Is that still true given that it's not? Okay.
No, but I don't want to steal my own thunder. I'll come to that.
Okay.
That's a good observation. I'm talking to you what used to be and still is, and it's still applicable. I'm not saying no, forget it. But again, keep an open mind to kind of diversify that portfolio. But yes, we'll come back to that. Geographic concentration of related industries. That geographic is key. That geographic is falling apart individually. Okay, so what? Well, look at where are you? Ag. I thought I had ag somewhere. You can see a bunch of them are back here, which is transforming, meaning they don't have that key concentration and they're losing jobs. There still may be important to sustain all these, for example, transportation, obviously, but that's manufacturing, transportation, whatever. But you can look at how this can go for hours and hours and hours, right? But here's a chart that shows those clusters, the expenditures, and the orange one shows the expenditures made within your geographic region, and the brown one shows the leakage, meaning the cluster needs that oxygen, but it's bringing it from outside. So as a community, you can go and say, ooh, our agribusiness are strong. Well, it's bleeding a lot. That may be exports. It may be products that are being sold elsewhere. Not necessarily materials to bring in. But this gives you an idea. Oh my God, that cluster is bleeding. What can we do to stop that bleeding. And then we go to that attraction, creation, and looking for assets within our community. Yes, sir.
You've used the term, and government uses industry, and that's so 19th century. We're still beholden to the industrial model, and we're trying to think differently. So when we start talking about industries, it's so easy for people think about that factory. Shouldn't there be a more different jargon to let people understand that when we're talking about related enterprises and businesses, not use that term industry? Is there any discussion on that? Because I know in our communities, that's the big thing.
Yeah, I mean, it is tied to the industrial age after all, that word. I have not thought about that because that's what resonates. If I come with a new term to these communities, they're going to go, what? But I will think about that. That's a great idea. Or here, let's brainstorm. What term would you use?
Sector.
Sector. We could use sector. Anybody else? I don't know the answer. I don't have all the answers.
He said enterprise.
Enterprise. Okay, that's a good one.
Vertical market.
Another mental note. Yes, sir?
Vertical markets.
Vertical markets. So again, it's just to give an idea. This takes a little bit more technical experience to do these analyses, but the data is out there typically for free. It's lagging 2-3 years, unless you want to pay and get it more recent. But it's not calculus. It's not rocket science, really, to get to these. And there's zillions things you can do. Okay, let me see what's next. Any questions before I move on from your CARE model and your cluster-based economic development? Yes?
It appears like there's a very strong, almost perfect relationship between in-region and out-region. As in-region increases, out-region increases. Is that necessarily a bad thing?
No, because...
But you described it as bleeding.
Yes. So, it is not necessarily a bad thing. It's going to vary by the cluster type because you cannot produce everything in your region. That's a given. But if we could at least cut this baby at half, by half.
So, but based on that, what appears to be a strong relationship, would the red be cut in half at the same time?
Well, we're trying to expand the red. So
right.
You would have to analyze exactly what's going out and whatever does not need to be going out, and you can keep it there, shoot for that. You're not going to get rid of all the brown one. But I see your relationship here. I would argue that if you increase that one by selectively and strategically picking what's here, then that relationship is going to change. And we can try it. But this takes years, obviously. You look at it, you go after those industries, you bring them in, the typical economic development activities. So now let me shift gears and go to another one so CARE model and cluster-based are typically focused on jobs and industry, which is the economic development part of the equation. Now I'm going to shift to one that is more community economic development, meaning it encompasses both. How am I doing on time, Kevin? Community capitals. That's a very popular framework, very holistic. It really helps to frame the issue and frame the discussion. When I say capital, what do you think of? The first thing?
Money.
Money, right? Well, this model argues there's 7 capitals. The first one is the financial, right? Which you correctly said when I think capital, it's financial. Income, wealth, security, credit, investment. That's one capital. The other one is natural. Remember that environment part I was talking to you about? That's air, soil, water, landscape, biodiversity, blah, blah, blah. That's another community capital. Unfortunately, we typically go with the money only. And many communities go and say, we don't have the money. And I tell them, it's not the only capital. So, natural is another one. Another one is built. Your water systems, your roads, your railroads, and hopefully your broadband is there. That's another capital that comes into the mix. Then we've got human capital, which is your quality of leadership, your educational attainment? Is your workforce healthy? Then we've got 4. We've got 3 to go. Political. How inclusive is your government? Do they have connections to external vertical linkages that can help? That's another capital that many people overlook. Then we've got cultural. In the Mississippi Delta, which is one of the poorest regions in the nation, it's all about the blues. Anybody here likes the blues? So they're capitalizing on that big time. Big time. So cultural is important, and it is a capital. And social, which is the glue of them all. That's why I left it at the end. Social capital. There's a lot of jargon out there of what it is, but it boils down to who you know, what can they do for you, and more importantly, do they trust you? Without trust, this one here goes down, and with it, all of it. Because what do economic developers typically do when they get a call and they don't have the answer? They hang up, they pick up and call. That's social capital right there. That you know who holds these capitals, who's hoarding them, or who's leveraging on them. So you can have a cultural asset. Remember that asset mapping? You can have a cultural asset, but nobody can get to it. Well, then go and leverage and build capital. Right? Then convince your political capital to go, and we're going to see an example. But all these, leveraging, not hoarding them or squandering them, but leveraging them leads to healthy ecosystems, vibrant regional economies.
Particularly in a discussion about broadband and entrepreneurial efforts based on that, where does intellectual capital fit into this model?
Depends how you define intellectual, but I would put it here.
So
or here. Depends.
So ideas and...
Don't quote me on that. Can you please delete that part? Sorry, sir, but yes.
Yeah.
That's where I would put. But here's the great thing about this framework. It's so flexible. So flexible. So flexible. It's not set in stone, but it provides a great roadmap. That's what I tell communities. Can you see the forest? Or are you looking at a specific tree? Can you see the forest? Because you may be focusing on this particular tree, but you don't see the other ones back there. So, an example. J&Q wants a walking trail. I just got the 5-minute warning, so... J&Q in a community wants a walking trail, right? The first thing she does is she takes leadership development class, learning new skills. What capital is that one? It's human, right? Then she partners with local hospital that wants to... Again, why did she know how to identify that? Because of social capital. Then, state-centered forms for a grant that can be used. That's political capital. Local tourism board likes the idea, provides additional funding. That's financial capital. Then city and county build the trail infrastructure, build capital, and then they add some historic markers. That's cultural capital. What is the common denominator of all those actions? J&Q, right? Do they trust J&Q? Does the hospital trust the local politicians? Does the tourism board trust the hospital? Do they?
Maybe.
Uh-huh. And if they don't, what's going to happen with J&Q's trail? Not going to happen. Or if it happens, it's not going to be sustainable. So what? Well, it is a community buy-in. Community feels ownership of that trail. It is sustainable. Nobody can do it alone. And you are part of a jigsaw, larger picture. Be it regional, be it whatever, but keep that in mind. So we go for a break. We'll be back. Now that we have your traditional approaches covered in mind for what we're going to be talking about. Before we got into this, remember we had the community development approaches, we had the economic development approaches, and we had a combination of both. One of them was the community capitals that we just discussed. Now the other one is intelligent communities. That is the model I've been using in Mississippi for the past 2 years, and I'm tweaking it as I go. But before we jump into intelligent communities, I really want to take some time to go over some trends and some stats that I think, and I've seen time and time again, that they do set the stage for intelligent communities. If I jump into intelligent communities directly, some of you may miss some important things, and that will be totally my fault. So bear with me. I'm going to share with you some stats and some trends regarding the digital economy. And then from there, we're going to cover the concept. And at the end, before lunch, I'm going to ask you to sit with, if you have any other members from your community, to sit together because you're going to fill out a very quick checklist, which we will explain later on why. And you'll see how it should help. But the intelligent community outreach that I do in Mississippi is totally based on that community development self-help asset management approach. You're going to see that it's nothing new. It's just that I took that with a different concept and ran with it. Okay? So now, what is the digital age? It's kind of hard to define, but it's got certain characteristics we can look at. To reach 100 million users worldwide, it took the telephone 75 years. It took the mobile phone 16 years. It took the web 7 years. Facebook 4. Instagram 2. Pokemon Go 1 month. Now, I can tell you're more engaged because that was a serious stat. I don't know why everybody laughed. But that's always good. You tell me what's the trend in those number of years.
Technology is more and more important.
It's going down quick.
Youthful adopters, too.
Yes.
Young people.
But the trend is that never in human history have we been adapting technology that quick. Adopt. You tell me what's different there. You've got the Vatican in 2005 when Pope John Paul died, and then Pope Francis was about to speak 8 years later. You tell me what's different in those two images.
Video cameras on your phone.
Selfies. That's a good one. Now, folks, don't be so harsh. We have a flip phone over here. Every minute of 2015, every minute on average, you have those 300 hours of videos uploaded to YouTube, 695 newer passengers take rides, 110,000 Skype calls. It is huge. It is booming. It is exploding. And there's something here that young folks cannot understand, is that for the first time ever, more people access the internet through the mobile, tablet, than a desktop. For us older folks, that's wow. For younger folks, they're like, what's a desktop? Why is that such a big thing? Because the mobile follows you wherever you go. That has huge implications that I'm going to cover later. 80% of traffic to the web will take place in mobile next year, assuming we're already in 2017. 80%. And again, what's the power of that? Is that you've got your mobile with you. You can Google stuff quickly. You can find things. I'm driving through Kentucky. Pull up Google Maps. A 7-year-old's birthday Saturday. Take me to a flower shop, Google. And I go to a flower shop without knowing the region. That's one implication. You still don't believe me. The digital economy by this year employed 32 million more people than it did in 2010. How many of those jobs were here in Pikeville? Very interesting is that about 3/4 of those jobs can be done remotely, meaning telework. By 2020, the digital economy alone will reach 6.6 trillion with a T among the top 20 nations. Top 20. Anybody knows how many nations there are?
Under 90.
186.
About. So the top 20 are generating 6.6 trillion. Can you imagine if all 186 did that? If they were all participating at that point. So folks, what I'm trying to say is that it's just started. There is a lot of room to grow. A lot. And rural communities can benefit from it. Because of that discussion of geographic proximity and industrial age, it's all kaput. But there is a big, big, big stone obstacle called the digital divide. I'm going to get into that later on, but it is huge. Consider that a little bit over half of the world population is offline. And yet, you're seeing these numbers. McKinsey, So we've got 4 characteristics of the digital age. Some people say it started with the invention of the transistor in 1947. Some people say it started with the personal computer in the 80s. Some people say it started with the iPhone in 2007. It's up for grabs. But I can share with you 4 characteristics that remain and still will be. It is exponential, it is digital, it combines, and it disrupts. It's exactly what happened to the ag economy when industries rolled around. It did not. So we're playing the same tape again. It's just we don't see the forest, we're looking at a couple of trees. Exponential, what do I mean with that? It means that it takes really slow and then it takes off, especially on the hardware side. Okay? That's a video graphic of a game, computer game in 1992 versus 2014. I don't know what the name of the game is, but I have it there in my notes, but I didn't bring my glasses. Okay, so you get the point. It also means that if the Beetle improved as computer chips did in 1971 up to 2015, that good old Beetle. Who drove a Beetle? Yeah. Okay. If it improved as did computer chips, that almighty Beetle would reach 300,000 miles per hour. It would have a fuel economy of 2 million miles per gallon. And it would cost 4 cents. That's how quickly things are moving on the hardware side. That's why it's just beginning. Because of this exponential capability, devices become cheaper, smaller, and more powerful. Everybody has in their pocket, in their smartphone, more number crunching capability than all of NASA did in 1969. And you've got it in your pocket. So that's the first characteristic. The second, it's digital. Good or bad, everything is being digitized. There are multiple issues. I'll get to those later. But that is a very powerful video. What does the guy have left on his desk.
I wish my desk looked like that.
Let's digitize them now. And then you'll have it on your desktop. So that's what everything is being digitized. Everything. Of the trillion photographs taken since the first one in the mid-1900s, about a good 10% of it were taken alone in 2013. We don't realize it. Millennials do. I take a picture now, put it on Facebook, and 30 seconds later, my friends in Europe are seeing it. This all digital thing is called the Internet of Everything. Some people call it the Internet of Things. I call it the Internet of Everything. Well, not me, but other folks. Because the Internet of Everything consists of four things. It consists of people that through social media and their devices are generating data. It consists of things, of sensors. Everything's having a sensor. It consists of a lot of data, and it consists of processes to analyze that data. That's the Internet of Everything. In other words, the physical world can now be digitized, monitored, measured, and optimized. It is estimated that by 2020 there will be at least 50 billion with a B devices connected to the Internet, all generating data, all putting them in the cloud. If it works out, the IOE is a 19 trillion with a T opportunity over the next decade. And here's the very powerful thing. You don't have to be in New York City to tap into that 19 trillion. You can be in Pikeville. Will you tap into that opportunity? And that's only talking about the Internet of Everything. But more importantly, if everything works out, there's a lot of security issues. Yes, sir.
Also, by 2020, according to a report by Intuit back in 2013, they said by the year 2020, 40% of the U.S. working population would be 1099 employees, i.e. contract employers.
And I'll get to that.
I mean,
but yes.
All right.
The nature of work is changing.
Yeah.
It sure is. So if everything goes well, there's a lot of security issues. There's a lot of issues between databases not talking to each other. Right? But if everything that gets cleared, the IOE can have an $11 trillion impact on the economy every year. So the U.S. economy right now is about $20 trillion. By 2025, maybe $25 trillion. Add 11 to that every year, up to 11, from 4 to 11. The pie will expand. The question is, will you get your slice? Yes?
I realize you'll probably get to this, but you keep talking about economic impact, but not necessarily, and implying employment or entrepreneurial impact. But if you look at the trends in automation, robotics, and artificial intelligence, I would say there's some question about the kind of employment, broadly speaking, increase that you're suggesting.
Yes. And this number here is dollars. It's proprietary. It's knowledge. It's software. It's application, not necessarily jobs.
Right. So
But it is tied.
in terms of holistically speaking community economic development, I feel like we face some challenges that we should acknowledge early on in this discussion so that everything we're saying is framed in terms of how do we, again, who benefits, how do we distribute the opportunity to work more broadly.
That is exactly right, and I'll get to that. Okay. So it combines. What does that mean? So this a massive amount of data can be combined, can be analyzed, and we can start to discover patterns we didn't know existed. To fight for disease, to find, to do whatever, we're getting a lot of data. There is a great book called The Patient Will See You Now instead of the doctor. And that book argues that what the printing press did for knowledge, the books, it liberated, it democratized. The smartphone will do for healthcare. What's holding it back is regulations. And of course, we've got to make sure that if you breathe into that thing and it tells you you've got, cancer in your lungs, you don't freak out immediately and it was a mistake, right? The false negatives they're working through that, but because of these algorithms, it's getting better. There are now companies and apps that you can have a mobile clinic lab on your phone. The dam will break. Will you have your raft ready? So, technology lab, we've been very good at putting information in, digitizing, taking pictures, doing this, doing that, but we're not very good at getting it out. What we really need from that massive amount of data. But artificial intelligence, specifically deep learning algorithms, are changing that. And I'm not a computer scientist, but I can tell you that deep learning algorithms, they learn on their own by trial and error. Just like we do as humans, right? You're 2 years old, your mom says, don't touch that stove, it's hot. What? Well, computers can do it a lot faster. Trial and error, okay? That's changing things. Zero to expert. This robotic company in Japan developed a robot with deep learning algorithm and put randomly placed objects in a room. It took the robot 8 hours to find them and stack them. When put in a network with additional 6 robots with that same software, they did it in an hour. The chief engineer for the company said it would have taken my team months to accomplish that. X-rays and CT scans, there are now algorithms that can read the image. They can find what the human eye cannot in very high resolution images, CT scans and all that. They compared them to 4 expert radiologists. They were 50% more effective. The algorithm works. Skin cancer. There is an app that you can pick up your phone, take pictures of your mole, upload it, and immediately compares it to millions of pictures. It does some analyses in it, and if it finds something interesting, it'll flag and notify your physician. And I didn't have to travel 3 hours to the dermatologist. I did it from my living room. And the Breakout arcade game, that one talks about whoever played that game in the 80s, deep learning computer played it. The first 30 minutes, it lost 25% of the time, half of the time. After 1 hour of playing, it did not lose at all. And after 2 hours, it found loops. It found some issues on the software that not even the programmer knew existed. So the key thing is this. Because this ability to combine, fortunes were made last century when everything manual was mechanized and electrified, right? Well, now, everything that's electrified can be cognified. Artificial intelligence will be like electricity. It will be everywhere. You will only miss it when it's not there. Big oil is the 21st century. Big data is the oil of the 21st century, but like oil, it's got to be refined into gasoline for it to be useful. So many people are talking about the algorithm economy and all that. Now, keep in mind, I'm keeping a tunnel vision. There are other issues out there. But this is what's going to set the stage for the intelligent community approach. Digital disruption. So this combination of data will lead to disruptions. Investor concern over the threat of new technologies is overstated, said the report of a board member over a board of a specific company that if you're old enough, you will know what I'm talking about. 6 years later, it went belly up because it was overstated or whatever they said. Disruptions are quicker. Yes, we experienced this from ag to industry, but it took decades. This is moving a lot faster. Anybody can tell me what's that?
Digital camera.
The first digital camera. Who said that? Ha!
Thank you, sir.
That's the first digital camera. You know who invented it?
Kodak.
What happened to Kodak? It's called the innovator's dilemma. How am I, as a company, disrupt the thing that is my company? Of course, when engineers proposed that, Management, in all fairness, said, how are people going to be interested in digital photography with that behemoth? Granted. But when then things started to get smaller, more powerful, they insisted. And management said, no, the future is film. And what happened? So disruption. Then, you still don't believe me? Look at most valuable companies between 2006 and 2016. 10 years difference. Years 2006, most of them are what? Energy. 3 of them are energy-related companies. 10 years later, it's the blue, which are technology companies. So digital disruption. There was a store in South Korea that was the number 2 store, wanted to become the number 1, but then it wanted to do it building additional stores. So they brainstormed and they said, how can we become number 1 without building additional stores? Let's take that money and instead purchase advertising space on the subway stations. And through QR codes, let's put our products there. Gallon of milk, gallon of juice, bread, whatever. So while people were waiting on their subway, they go shopping. And when they get home, it's being delivered. And that's 4 years old. You can imagine what happened to that store. It became the number 1 store without building an additional physical, going back to that discussion, store. Digital has the potential to liberate rural communities from that lack of density. That's been a very severe handicap during the industrial age. So innovation, it's changing innovation. That's what we were talking about, clusters and geographic and all that stuff. I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 things that do not work. And then Mr. Einstein said the secret to creativity is knowing how to hide your sources. Well, innovation is changing. You see, before it took place where a density of minds and resources were congregated physically. So that means urban areas and large companies have the advantage. In the digital age, it's changing because it's all about collaboration. And before, you had to have the density, but now you don't have to have that physical density. You can have a virtual density. And rural folks, we are very creative. We are. I've seen it time and time again. Connect them to this crowdsourcing and crowdfunding. And you have the potential to change things. How exactly does it work? The Washington Post did a survey of innovators and it asked them what are the 4 things that you look for, 3 things to locate. They said access to talent, networking opportunities, and proximity to customers. And somebody here said something about that. Right? Well, the digital rural areas offer with connectivity. That's a big how because of the digital divide. But with connectivity and know-how, we can have access to talent, potentially through telework. Right? Networking opportunities, we all know LinkedIn and Facebook and Skype and all that stuff. I don't have to be sharing a cubicle with you to have a meaningful discussion. And I can see your face expressions too. Proximity to customers. Why can't a business in Pikeville compete with a business in New York City? Why can't they? Back in the day, Pikeville doesn't have the market that New York City in that virtual. Brings us back to your moms and pops and your existing businesses. What are you doing to help them compete? And I'm sure you're going to get something about that tomorrow. And besides, we have better quality, natural amenities, and less traffic. So the landscape is shifting. Again, geographic proximity was before the thing, the bigger the better, tied to an office, a factory, mass producing everything. And the digital age has decentralization. You're starting to see that economic gardening focusing within, right? Work from anywhere, telework. There's a great program called Digital Works that helps with this respect. It trains, it places, and it mentors people to work from home from a portfolio of companies that are looking for remote workers. Because you see, There is a scam ratio of 60 to 1 when people tell you can work from home. Oh, really? I'm not going to buy that. But when you add that legitimacy to this program, that they have companies, legit companies, that are looking for remote workers. So there are other alternatives, and I know that that's going to be touched on later on, so I'm going to talk a lot about that. But open innovation is changing as well. So digital globalization means that digital flows that did not exist 15 years ago now have a larger footprint than goods in the economy. Let me repeat that. Goods have been around for 100 years at least. And these guys, digital flows, started 15 years ago and they have a larger footprint. There's this company in New York that makes shoes. They have a 50% margin, profit margin. 50%. They have 20 employees and 50 3D printers. You want a shoe? You go to my website, you download an app, you take a picture of your feet. It will come up with a 3D model of your feet. And it will feed it directly to the 3D printer, and lo and behold, off goes your shoes. Do you need to be really in New York City to do that? No. So that's what this is talking about. Trade was once confined to advanced economies. Now it's liberating folks. How, as a community, are you going to take advantage of that? I love this exercise. So, how many years did it take Airbnb to reach 600,000 rooms? No Googling, nothing. Come on.
2, 1 or 2.
Close. Close. 4. How long did it take the Hilton Hotel Company to reach 600,000 rooms?
100 years.
90 years. Yeah, talking about decentralizing stuff, that platform model is coming. It's here. And the biggest, sweetest thing of them all is that you don't have to be in that dense urban area anymore to be part of that 19 trillion pie. There's employment issues, which I'm going to cover later, but there you go. So that's the... and there's a lot of room to grow, folks. Even with all the stats I've told you right now, you can see that McKinsey did a study of dozens of indicators, building digital at blah, 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 blah. And they found out, give me a number from 0 to 100% of what the U.S. economy is tapping its digital potential at. 0 to 100%, folks. The U.S. economy is running at 18% of its digital potential. So you tell me if there's room to grow. But the key thing is, will rural communities be part of that expansion? Will they participate, or will they sit on the sidelines like they did on the industrial part of things for times, because there was a lack of density? But the lack of density is no more, folks. But the question becomes, does your community really want to be part of it? And well, I'm going to talk quickly about the gig economy. It's exploding. The 1099s you mentioned about, the gig economy has been around for a long time. Independent contractors, 1099s, contingent work. Then came along the sharing economy with goods and services that employ. But then you mix both, and you get the online gig economy, which is really what politicians are talking about when they say the gig economy. They're really talking about the online gig economy. Uber, Lyft, Care, TaskRabbit, just you name it. It grew twice as large, that employment, as did general employment over between 2004 and 2014. Because, folks, it's really easy to start anywhere, isn't it? Look at all those garages. Look who started there. And I'm not saying your community is going to end up with an Apple. But as long as the family lives from that and they are participating in the digital economy, multiply that 10 times family in your community, and you're going to be in a different spot. So economic paradigms need 3 things to change. They need a communication, energy and transportation convergence. For the first industrial revolution, it took telegraph, it took coal, and it took the railroad. And boom, we had a massive economic development follow that. Did we not? The second industrial revolution tapped into the TV, radio, telephone as the communication part of it, oil as energy, and transportation, and internal combustion engine to be precise. And then what happened? Boom! It ushered us into another wave of development. And now the next slide is with a huge question mark because there's a lot of issues to deal with. Scholars are arguing we are on the verge of a third. The difficult time we're seeing now, it's that transition phase. They argue. But once it settles in, it will move. But now, some people will be left behind and there are some issues. So, the internet makes possible a lot of things. Granted, it started as entertainment. It started as social media, right? Netflix. But it is moving quickly to more sophisticated applications. One of them is telework, which I mentioned, the program Digital Works. The other one is telehealth, about the smartphones and doing all that stuff. So I ask you, if your life depends on it, or your well-being, and your job depends on it, will you subscribe to faster broadband? Yes. Those are what many scholars are calling the killer apps. A killer app is something that drives adoption through the roof. Everybody must and needs it. Must have it and needs it. They are saying telehealth is coming, telework is coming for that. It's not only Netflix. I get that from a lot of public officials down in Mississippi. Why do I want faster internet just to load my Facebook status quicker? I don't think so. No! We can't see it yet, but it's coming. It's coming, folks. And remember that exponential characteristic? If you don't jump on board early on, chances are you're not going to catch up. Here, I'm just going to go quickly. Some tipping points. They did a survey of 900 tech academics and all those things. In case you're thinking I'm crazy on my own, well, they did this worldwide survey of insiders, and they asked them how many of them agreed that unlimited and free storage was going to be a reality by 2018. 91% said that's going to be a reality. By 2022, 84% said that the first 3D printed car will be in production. But yes, I mean, ask the folks that were driving horse carriages, what do you think about the car? Ooh. Me don't like that thing. We're at exactly the same phase, folks. We are. Oh, and wait until the next one, sir. Let me here sit right in front of you. First implantable mobile phone by 2023. Now, I always get the shaking of the not so young, and I always get a big smile from the young ones. See? The first 3D implantable liver transplant. 3D printers started printing plastic. Yes, they're now printing leather, metal, wood, living tissue. Can you imagine what will happen to mass manufacturing in the industrial economy when in 20 years you buy your iPhone, you buy the blueprints of your iPhone, and you print it in your living room? I always get that. This guy has totally lost it. I have not. I promise. 75%, 30% of corporate audits will be by artificial intelligence, and by 10% cars will be driverless by 2026 in 9 years. We're starting to see that, folks. It's moving a lot quicker. So, check this video.
Where your digital world is blended with your real world. Now we can. This is the world with holograms. What will they enable us to do? New ways to visualize our work.
I have an idea for
New ways to share ideas with each other.
how to
everything's going your end.
I just put the images in OneDrive.
Perfect.
More immersive ways to play. New ways to teach and learn.
So put the new trap in the place of the old one.
Now
And tighten here and here.
New ways to collaborate and explore the places we've never been. Look at this formation. Let's take a closer look. And new ways to create the things we imagine. Because when you change the way you see the world, you can change the world you see.
Bad timing, sorry. His daughter, and she plays him that, and he's there, and her daughter's like 1,000 miles away. And you must be thinking, oh, I'm not going to wear those bulky things, right? Of course not. Do you remember that? This is just quickly, it's a robot. It's coming up for sale late next year, $90,000 it costs. It will have prepackaged ingredients. You will download the recipes online, and then from your work, you will, through an app, ask it to start cooking you lasagna. My wife said, me want it, and I said, really. But now, remember that because of that cost, it now costs $90,000. It will go down. Now, would you want that robot to buffer while it's cooking your meal? You don't. You will purchase the recipes. You will purchase the prepackaged ingredients. That's their business model. And it will clean, too. Folks, I'm not crazy. This is a prototype. It's coming out next year. If you have $90,000 to spare, invite me to dinner, please. This is a virtual fitting room in Moscow. It uses Xbox technology where you can try and add earrings and purses and shoes and all that stuff. All of us that have daughters, mine are not teenagers yet, but they will be. I'm dreading the day that I'm going to go to the mall and spend a freaking day. Right? The business that
If
can...
they let you.
If they let me. True. The fortunes will be made if your Main Street business can do that. And the teenager can be 2,000 miles away. And then your local Main Street can then ship it to her, along with the shoes and purse and everything. That's an interactive sidewalk in Tokyo. Doesn't cost much, about $2,000, $3,000. And imagine what people would be saying, have you seen that sidewalk in Pikeville? Let's go check it out. So it's small things that contribute to this quality of life ambience. Civic engagement, a town in Spain uses Twitter. I'm going to just breeze through this because I'm running out of time. Precision ag, that's really important. It's coming. What I tell stakeholders in Mississippi is that the only group in Mississippi that can put up a fight with the carriers are the farmers. And they're reaching very quickly. Their connectivity speeds are not going to cut it soon. And they're not going to be happy. And I hope that that will nudge the carriers to better wire rural. That one here, you buy this, you add it to your iPad. It's a little thing. And if you're in the construction, design stuff, it digitizes the room. It gives you measurements, and it creates a 3D model of what you took with your iPad. So, how can we move towards this? How can we tap into that 11 trillion, whatever it's going to be coming at? Well, an intelligent community is one that where the Christ foresight understands the challenges it takes to prosper, steps to prosper. It takes conscious steps to prosper. It's got 6 indicators. 4 of them are traditional economic development indicators. The other 2 are related to digital. age, which is broadband connectivity and digital equality. Okay? So, ask yourself, does your community encourage deployment and adoption of broadband? Does your community do that? Are there any programs in place to prepare the workforce with digital age skills? Empathy, self-work, self-direction, technology skills. Does your community offer programs and incentives for hope and entrepreneurs? Those are the questions intelligent community asks themselves. Does your local government interact with its residents? There was a Twitter town hall in Starkville 5 years ago. They had a hashtag, they did this, they did that, whatever. My 2 girls were younger then, they were bathing, and I was there watching them, and I was participating in the Twitter town hall from my back. When they analyzed the data, they realized a big issue in Starkville was the schedule of the local parks and recreation. And the Board of Aldermen went, what? Where did this come from? Why? Because there is a specific demographics that shows up to your typical town halls. They have specific issues. But are you tapping to the rest of the community? So because a bunch of us that had small kids that could not afford to go to the town hall, we participated, and they realized, oh, we've got to expand the parks. Time. They didn't know it was an issue. Small things like that, folks, will get you a long way. When hospitals, employers, and schools have telehealth. Multiple online presence strategies. Are nonprofits aware of crowdfunding and crowdsourcing? Telecommuting policies. Again, it's coming. It's coming. I cannot emphasize that enough. And I think it's part of the solution for rural communities whose industrial parks are there just sitting idle. What about providing digital literacy? Is there a strategy in place to manage the online reputation of your community? This is a big thing in Mississippi. We're doing a pilot now with 3 communities. We're expanding it to 4 next semester. Have you Googled your community? Google your community, not now, and look at under images and tell me what you see. Do you like it? There was a small community in South Mississippi that did that in front of me. Went to images and they found out a big KKK picture was there up in center from the 50s. I guess it was black and white. The mayor almost fainted. And I said, that's what people are seeing. But we didn't put that. You may or may not. I'm not. But that's what they're seeing. So, stuff like that. But change is not easy, right? That's what you're going to face in your communities. They're going to resist it. They don't like it. But the digital divide is huge. And here are some stats on the broadband speeds and access. That's download speeds. In the U.S., it's the red bar. Then the dark brown is Kentucky. And then the light brown is SOAR. You've got decent connectivity. I mean, you're outpacing the average on the U.S. in upload speeds. But there are 2 counties that I need to ask you about. Owsley, and then the one right beside it, Jackson. They had speeds through the roof. Oh, they do? Okay, so that's throwing that average. But otherwise, it's looking like this. Is it appearing there?
Yes.
I apologize. I have to. So that's a digital divide index I just did for Kentucky because I love you all so much. It is at the census tract level, not even the county level. It's more granular. Darker red means a higher digital divide. Lighter red, so-so. Lighter green, so-so. And dark green, a low digital divide. And if you click on whatever, let me show. Here, it'll show you some of the stats, and I can share that with you. Technology is making us antisocial. That is a big issue, of course, but so did newspapers. Nobody's talking to anybody, right? I mean, there are issues. I'm just trying to sugarcoat them, but there are very, very serious issues. But here's the graph that I wanted to really talk about manufacturing I want to highlight two things from that graph. Number one, the blue line shows productivity, the red line shows employment. They decoupled back in 1981, meaning productivity was not dependent on employment because of technology. 1980, it took 25 jobs to produce 1 million in output. 2015, it takes 6. If you want to compete with cheaper labor countries, you're going to have to automate. But then the question becomes, what do you do with those that do not have the skills? You've got to make sure you retrain them. You see, agriculture was half of the workforce in the 1870s. Now it's 2%. The same trend is being seen here in manufacturing, and the same trend will happen with service. And there is a big issue of what's going to happen with those people. That is a huge, huge issue, and it's now hitting the presidential candidate, well, now the president-elect. Everybody's talking about it because the numbers are screaming at you that the landscape is shifting. So if you want your rural community to bring back those manufacturing jobs, there will not be the hundreds of jobs that used to be. There will be a couple well paid, but then the question is your workforce ready? There's a lot of other not good stuff, but chips and batteries especially can derail this. Cyber attacks, Big Brother, which is huge, privacy, which is huge, inequality, which I just spoke about. I love this picture. And institutions, will they survive? Will they still uphold our democratic values when all this dust settles? Because, folks, we are right in the middle. So, I'm going to close with this. Size does not matter in the digital age. It eliminates the middle of nowhere. Oh, I got that response many times when I was in Mississippi my first year. I would be curious. Where are you from? Oh, you wouldn't know. It's in the middle of nowhere. That mentality is a no-no in the digital age. And lastly, that's the question you've got to be asking and planning for. When most people can work anywhere, where will they choose to live and work? I'm finally going to shut up.
So everyone, you'll notice we got about a half an hour before lunch. In your packets, there is the Intelligent Communities checklist that Dr. Giardo has put together. So I'd encourage you to pull that out of your packet, that checklist, form groups. We've got a lot of elected officials here, so if you guys want to stand, maybe we could organize some groups around those communities. And if you guys want to get together, discuss that, those questions, go over that together, brainstorm, come up with ideas on this, figure out what you and your community can do together. So this is just an interactive session. If you guys want to organically just kind of come together, work on that checklist, build groups around your community. Thank you.
I would like one checklist per community, please. So if you don't know the answer, maybe somebody in the room, if not a guesstimate, will do. And then I'm going to put the data this afternoon, and I'll show you a report tomorrow morning. And then I will email you a specific report for your community.